The builder arrived at the house just after 8 in the morning. He was there to start work on a project that had been scheduled days earlier. The alarm was going off. He could hear it from outside. Through the window, he saw a woman lying at the bottom of the stairs. Her name was Janet Brown. She was 51 years old. She had been born in Southampton and spent her life helping others. She trained as a midwife and later worked as a research nurse at John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. Her family described her as peaceful and kind. She loved traveling and being outdoors. She was married to Graeme, who worked in pharmaceuticals. Together they had 3 children. Zara had moved to London after finishing university. Benedict was away completing his degree. Roxanne, the youngest at 17, still lived at home. The house sat on an 11-acre estate in Radnage, a small village in Buckinghamshire. It was remote and quiet. The area had been targeted by burglars recently, so Janet had joined the local neighborhood watch. She had also installed a panic alarm. Now she was lying at the bottom of the stairs. The day before, on Monday, the 10th of April, 1995, Janet left work in the afternoon and drove home in her Volvo. The house was being sold, and an offer had been accepted. Roxanne had gone out with a friend to celebrate passing a driving test. She left around 3:30. Graeme was away in Switzerland for work. Janet was going to be alone. Around 8 that evening, she spoke to one of Roxanne's friends on the phone. At 8:20, the builder called to discuss the next day's work. There was no answer. Graeme tried calling at 9. No answer. A neighbor drove past the house at 10 and heard the alarm going off. When she drove back later, she no longer heard it. The external alarm had stopped after about 20 minutes. The internal alarm kept sounding. The alarms had been triggered by 2 panic buttons. One was beside Janet's bed. The other was by the front door. The builder found her body the next morning. Her hands were handcuffed behind her back. Brown parcel tape covered her mouth. There was blood on the walls and ceiling. She had been struck repeatedly in the head with something heavy like a crowbar. She was naked, restrained, and gagged. There was no evidence of sexual assault. The house had been searched extensively, but nothing appeared to have been stolen. Her clothes were folded neatly beside her bed. Her dressing gown was on the floor. The killer had entered through the patio door. They tried cutting a hole in the glass using glass cutting equipment. Then they smashed through the second panel. They brought the tape and handcuffs with them. Police conducted a fingertip search of the fields near the house. Detective Superintendent Mike Short had been a policeman for 28 years. He had never seen a case like this. The house clearly looked occupied. A car was in the driveway. Lights were on. Why would someone break in knowing someone was home? Why try cutting the glass quietly and then make noise by smashing it? There was no reason for Janet to have been attacked so violently. She was handcuffed. She could not fight back. Based on the phone calls and the alarm, police believe she was murdered between 8:15 and 10:15 that evening. Officers spoke to neighbors and people in the area. Janet had never mentioned feeling unsafe. She had never said she was being followed or stalked. She had no concerns about being home alone. The investigation was massive. A fingertip search covered the gardens and surrounding area. The entire home was examined for fingerprints. Police made 2,500 inquiries. Roughly 2,000 witness statements were taken. Roxanne said the days after felt unreal. She remembered going to the supermarket and seeing rows of newspapers with her mother's face on them. She and her friend were supposed to stay at the house with Janet that night, but plans changed at the last minute. She always felt guilty about not being there. The post-mortem revealed an extremely violent death. Janet had been hit in the face. Marks on her body showed she had been forced to lie on her back. The tape around her nose and mouth was so tight she likely suffocated within minutes. The weapon was never found. It would have taken the killer about 30 seconds to get from the door to the bedroom. Police believe that was where they came face to face. A small piece of tape was found on the bedroom floor. The key to the handcuffs was under her body. Even though the alarm was sounding, the killer stayed inside the house. Diluted blood was found on the bedroom light switches. They had washed their hands and then went back upstairs. Most burglars would not take a chance knowing someone was inside. They would wait until the house was empty. Whoever did this had taken time to try cutting a man-sized hole in the patio door. Then, for some reason, they decided to smash their way in. Police considered 5 theories. A robbery gone wrong, This did not make sense. Why strike at night when a car was in the driveway and lights were on? The house had been searched, but nothing was stolen. The television and VCR were unplugged but not removed. 100 pounds in a pot in the kitchen was still there. Most burglars would not make so much noise to get in. A contract killing. If it was, would a hitman not have committed the murder immediately in the bedroom rather than waiting over an hour and staying in the house with the alarm blaring? A sexually motivated killing. This was ruled out almost immediately. There were no signs of sexual violence, industrial espionage. Graeme had an important job as a research chemist. Could this have been linked to his work? Graeme himself did not think so. This theory went nowhere. A kidnapping gone wrong. This was also discounted. The killer made no effort to remove her from the house. There was no theory that explained what happened that night. Every theory was contradicted by facts. The intruder showed planning. They had an iron bar or truncheon, 2 types of tape, handcuffs, a glass cutter, and probably a torch. More than 99% of burglars would run on hearing an alarm. This one continued the attack and then coolly washed their hands and went back upstairs. The motive was unknown. In most murders, once the motive is identified, solving the case becomes much easier. There were no indicators that Janet had a boyfriend. Everything pointed to the fact she was a respectable woman who doted on her family. Graeme was definitely in Switzerland when she was killed. He had nothing to gain by her death. A neighbor who drove past the house that night saw a car parked in an area locally known as the Triangle. It was set back off the road. The neighbor took note because of recent burglaries in the area. Cars parked at that time of night were suspicious. The person who carried out this act would have been heavily bloodstained. An appeal was made for anyone with information to come forward. A £10,000 reward was offered. It was the week leading up to Easter. Someone that evening would have gone home with a lot of blood on them. The taping of the window was peculiar. The tape used was all-weather cellar tape, a rather unusual substance. It was not common. It was used to repair greenhouses and cloches. Only 1,300 rolls had been supplied to the local area that year. Masking tape was also used to restrain her. That was common and could not be traced. The handcuffs were also common and could not be traced. A glass cutter and an instrument to break the window were also used. All most unusual things. Together, they could mean something to somebody. 10 months after the murder, police received 2 answer phone messages from a man who did not identify himself. The messages were not believed to be hoax calls. What the man was saying and how he was saying it suggested he had significant information. An appeal was made for him to come forward. He never did. He was never heard from again. In June 1996, a 47-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of the murder. His identity was not released. He was interviewed at High Wycombe Police Station. This lead, like all the others, went nowhere. Life for the Brown family had been completely shattered. In most cases, time offers a chance to process grief. But when a murder remains unsolved and the person responsible is not brought to justice, closure does not come. The years only make the pain sharper. Every day without answers leaves the family with more questions and a deepening sense of injustice. Zara found herself having panic attacks and crying uncontrollably. Her mother was always there for them. She juggled working life with family life, but her family was everything to her. She was calm and kind and gentle. She was alone that night, defenseless. It was hard to understand why somebody felt the need to handcuff her and be so violent and brutal. She was bludgeoned to death, which was a horrible thought. It was baffling. The family never went back to the house. The horror of what had taken place meant it no longer felt like home. Roxanne later moved to London to live with Zara. She commuted to finish her A-level exams. They were extremely frightened and vigilant with security, putting grills on doors and windows. Zara suffered panic attacks and woke at night listening for noises. Years slowly added up. Before long, it had been 2 decades since Janet's murder. For those left behind, that passage of time created a strange kind of limbo. The world continued to move forward, but they could not truly move on, still carrying all the pain that existed from the beginning. In 2015, there was finally a breakthrough. It was the 20th anniversary of the murder. The Major Crime Investigation Review team commenced a review of the circumstances surrounding Janet's death. Items were submitted to forensic scientists in the hope of using advancements in forensic science. A DNA profile was produced. It belonged to a man who was not a member of the Brown family. It did not match anyone on the police database, which had more than 6 million people on it. Peter Byrne would not reveal which item the DNA had been taken from. He appealed to the public to put names forward of people who could have potentially been involved. He believed there were people out there who had information. More than 1,000 men were screened and ruled out. All of the unanswered questions and extremely strange events that took place that night remained baffling and confusing. Janet was not a woman who had enemies. Nothing was stolen. It is a case that simply does not make sense. The murder was planned and brutal. The horror of her death stays with the family every day. She was attacked and killed in the family home, a place where everyone should be safe. There is DNA evidence which will help bring the killer to justice. But help is needed to find them. She was a kind and loving person. Her death broke their hearts. Police are encouraging people to come forward even if the person they suspect is dead. If that is the case, DNA samples can be taken from relatives to compare against the DNA of the offender found at the scene. For her family, this senseless murder continues to haunt them. It never goes away. It made them very wary of people in certain situations, very security conscious, always making sure somebody knows where they are. A reward of up to £20,000 has been offered for information which leads to a conviction. 30 years on, the countryside remains quiet and rolling. Perhaps the last place anyone would expect such a serious crime to be committed. But one thing has not changed. The big question: who killed Janet Brown? It has been over 30 years since she was killed. Her family have waited far too long for answers. With modern advances in forensic science and the DNA profile, investigators are closer than ever to finding the truth. But that final breakthrough still depends on one crucial missing link. By keeping Janet's story alive, by getting as many eyes on this case as possible, someone may come forward or a new lead may emerge. Justice for Janet and for the loved ones she left behind is long overdue.